You awaken in a royal bed, beneath velvet drapes so heavy they could crush a commoner. The fire has gone out. The air smells like wax, damp stone, and something faintly ceremonial. You're a princess, or at least the royal marriageable version of one. Congratulations. But don't get too comfortable. You won't be choosing your husband. That decision is currently being debated by your grandmother, your foreign minister, and a nervous footman with a family tree longer than your train. Because in Victorian times, love is optional. Lace, however, is not. Neither is diplomacy, propriety, or producing heirs with the correct jawline. Welcome to royal matchmaking, 19th century style, where the wedding is less about romance and more about empire management. Now breathe. Let the palace clock tick softly in the background. And while you're here, subscribe. And tell me what country you're watching from. You don't remember being born, of course. But that didn't stop half of Europe from having an opinion about it. From the moment your mother screamed in labor and the midwife announced, "It's a girl," three things became immediately clear. 1. Your future would not belong to you. 2. Your marriage would be political. And 3. You'd better be attractive in a highly specific, diplomatically useful way. You are not just a child. You are a royal daughter, which, in the Victorian era, is another way of saying a living, breathing bargaining chip in a corset. And so, even before you learn to walk, you are being prepared, not for love, not for happiness, but for marriage. And not just any marriage, a royal one, a useful one, a union that can reinforce alliances, stabilize borders, or, if you're really lucky, keep your ambitious cousin from launching an entirely avoidable war. Your training begins early. A nursemaid rocks you gently while murmuring court gossip. A governess teaches you not only to read and write, but to curtsy while doing it. You're taught to keep your voice soft, your posture upright, and your emotions completely invisible. The last one is especially important. You don't get to have public feelings. That's for commoners. Your brother, meanwhile, is being groomed to rule. Tutors lecture him on law, statecraft, and battlefield strategy, all before he turns 12. He's encouraged to speak his mind, test boundaries, question authority. You, on the other hand, are discouraged from asking anything at all, especially about why your education is mostly embroidery, French grammar, and the art of looking vaguely interested without appearing too eager. Because, of course, the goal isn't to shape your mind. It's to polish your manners. There is an art to being pleasant without being forward, graceful without being seductive, intelligent without being threatening. You must be like porcelain, admired, delicate, and expensive to replace. And so your days are filled with rehearsals. Rehearsals for conversations you haven't had yet, glances you might someday exchange at a royal ball, walks you'll be expected to take, slowly, demurely, beside some foreign prince you've only ever seen in a miniature portrait, possibly holding a falcon. Your body, meanwhile, is quietly claimed by tradition. A rotating cast of women, ladies-in-waiting, nurses, governesses, monitor your health, your hair, your skin tone, and most importantly, your waist. Because regardless of how brilliant you may secretly be, your marriage prospects will live and die by the circumference of your corseted torso. By the time you are 9, you have learned 3 essential truths. Standing still is a performance. Silence is safety. And smiling in portraits is deeply inappropriate. The smiling rule is serious. Royals in the 1800s did not smile in official portraits. Not because they were unhappy, though many were, but because smiling implied spontaneity, and spontaneity suggested emotion. And emotion was something that could not be trusted in people who were born to rule. So your portraits show you with a neutral expression, your spine impossibly straight, your dress heavily embroidered with symbols you don't fully understand. Lions, unicorns, crests, saints. You are 9 years old and already an emblem. You overhear things too. She's got her mother's nose, someone says, but let's hope she doesn't inherit her chin. The Habsburgs were cursed with those jaws. Someone else chuckles. You pretend not to hear, but you do. And that's how it happens. Slowly, silently, and with a great deal of lace, you are transformed into a vessel. For lineage, for alliances, for political leverage disguised as romance. There are rumors, always, about who you might marry someday. Perhaps the second son of the King of Prussia. Perhaps the Austrian Archduke, if his lung issues clear up. Perhaps even a Russian Grand Duke, though your grandmother says they drink too much and have strange ideas about religion. Each name is accompanied by a flurry of letters, court discussions, discreet background checks, and sometimes, horrifyingly, an artist's rendering of what your potential future children might look like. You are not consulted. Occasionally, when you visit the gardens, you see your brother practicing fencing, or shooting at targets in the orchard, or riding a horse far too fast for someone with so few consequences. You are not permitted to fence, or shoot, or ride unsupervised. But you are expected to sit, politely, while someone tries to match the color of your eyes to the sapphires in a family heirloom necklace, just in case they want to use it for your engagement portrait one day. Your governess tells you stories about fairy tale princesses who fall in love with brave knights. But you notice that your bedtime stories always seem to end with a quiet marriage and a well-negotiated dowry. No dragons, no escapes, just a parade, and a very long banquet. And so you continue, quiet, composed, almost regal. A child rehearsing adulthood, a daughter preparing to become a wife before she ever becomes a woman. Because in the world of Victorian royalty, being born female means being born for something. And that something is a wedding. You are 15 now, technically still a child. Functionally, a marital asset in motion. You may not feel ready. But don't worry, you won't be making the decision. That's already happening in rooms you aren't allowed to enter. Rooms with velvet curtains, long tables, and very serious men using maps and surnames like bargaining chips. And at the head of this imperial dating service? Possibly your grandmother, possibly your father. But ideally, if you're really high-ranking, your fate lies in the capable, corseted hands of Queen Victoria herself. Because if marriage is a political game, Victoria and Albert were the reigning champions. Together, they treated their children's weddings like international chess matches. And they played to win. Forget romance. They had something far more important: strategy. Victoria gave birth to 9 children. Albert called them his campaign. That wasn't a joke. Each child was married off with surgical precision. The eldest daughter, Vicky, was matched with the future Kaiser of Prussia. A solid choice, uniting Britain with a rising German power. The second son, Bertie, married Alexandra of Denmark, strengthening ties to Scandinavia. Another daughter went to Hesse, one to Saxe-Coburg, a son to Russia. Every marriage a move, every move a message. This wasn't a family tree. It was a diplomatic blueprint, and the message was clear. The British royal family wasn't just reigning, it was networking. Now let's be clear. These weren't shotgun weddings or forced ceremonies behind locked doors. There was always some semblance of consent, the royal version of, "Do you approve of this stranger we selected for you?" after months of secret correspondence and subtle threats from three empires. But the illusion of choice was just that, an illusion. Because when your entire existence is political, so is your marriage. And if you dare to fall in love with someone inconvenient, say, a dashing French soldier or a poet with radical ideas, then the matchmakers simply work faster. They'll fly in a charming foreign prince, throw you at each other during a carefully curated garden party, and pretend the sparks are your own idea. That's the art of dynastic manipulation. Orchestrate the moment so well you think you made the choice. They never say it directly, of course. No one announces, "Your womb will unify Europe." That would be gauche. Instead, they speak in soft euphemisms. He's of noble character. The bloodlines are compatible. His mother's side descends from Charlemagne, which in this world is another way of saying he's fertile, German, and not too ugly in the right lighting. Emotion isn't required, but ancestry, essential. By the late 19th century, the European nobility had become so intertwined that many royal couples were already cousins, second cousins, first cousins once removed, sometimes both. Queen Victoria herself was first cousins with Prince Albert. Their children, of course, continued this trend with enthusiasm. Some of them married other cousins. Others married their cousins' cousins. And by the time World War I rolled around, you could barely throw a crown without hitting someone directly descended from Victoria. This wasn't an accident. It was by design. You see, inbreeding wasn't considered dangerous. It was considered secure. The more you married within the royal network, the fewer outsiders you had to trust. It was like elite blood-based encryption. Only instead of passwords, you had hemophilia. And so the matchmaking continued, not just across Europe, but above Europe, in that rarefied air where royals exist not as individuals, but as links in a centuries-long chain of treaties, trade agreements, and mutual suspicion. Each match had to balance religion, geography, temperament, and most importantly, political neutrality. You couldn't marry someone too ambitious, but also not someone too unimportant. They had to be useful, but not threatening. Influential, but malleable. Handsome, but not vain. In other words, nearly impossible to find, which made every successful marriage feel like a minor miracle, or a well-played hand. Behind the scenes, there were agents, royal intermediaries, who acted like matchmakers, negotiators, and spies rolled into one. They examined lineage charts, whispered at court receptions, and passed along flattering descriptions. Selectively edited, of course. He's very intelligent. Translation, opinionated but rich. She's full of character. Translation, loud, possibly unstable. Their family is deeply respected. Translation, terrifying but useful. Sometimes a match fell apart. A dowry too small. A past scandal revealed. A last-minute rebellion that made the bride's father suddenly less appealing as a dinner guest. And sometimes matches were made not despite scandal, but because of it. Nothing solidifies loyalty like binding a risky noble house to your own by marriage. If they betray you, they're betraying family. And if they behave, well, then you've absorbed their influence. Either way, it's a win. You may wonder, amidst all this, did anyone marry for love? Occasionally, briefly, by accident. But the system didn't reward affection. It rewarded obedience. And the matchmakers, with their lace gloves and hard eyes weren't in the business of romance. They were in the business of empire maintenance. And you? You were part of the plan long before you could spell your own name. So as you sit quietly in the drawing room, pretending to embroider, while two chancellors debate whether you should marry the Prussian heir or the Belgian duke, remember, you are not being matched. You are being positioned. And every stitch you sew is just one more thread in a very old, very powerful web. You've come of age. Congratulations. There was no party, no confetti, just an unspoken shift in how everyone looks at you, with sharper eyes and quieter voices. You're not just a royal child anymore. You're eligible, which in royal terms means available for strategic acquisition. Across Europe, distant courts are taking notes. Ambassadors are watching. Family trees are being reviewed by candlelight. Somewhere in Vienna, a bored bureaucrat is comparing the angles of your cheekbones to those of your grandmother, just to ensure the line is still respectable. Your portrait has been sent ahead. It's not the real you, of course. You were instructed not to smile. You're wearing a gown stiff with embroidery and staring just past the viewer as if contemplating your duty to the empire. Or perhaps just the tightness of your corset. But the painting isn't meant to capture your personality. It's meant to market you. You've entered the era of whispers. Every hallway you pass through, every salon you sit in, every dinner party you attend, they're all echo chambers of speculation now. Court ladies and noble gossips trade updates like stockbrokers. Who's available? Who's unwell? Who might secretly be barren? Who had a fit last week and is now considered emotionally unstable? And you? You are being watched from every angle. Your skin is examined for pallor. Your gait is studied for signs of grace. Your posture must be perfect, not just to appear elegant, but to suggest moral discipline. Even your laugh, if you dare to use it, is assessed for volume. Too quiet, and you're considered timid. Too loud, and you're unrefined. God forbid you sneeze in public. That could mean anything from poor breeding to inherited weakness of the lungs. In short, your entire being is up for discussion. You are now a trending topic at every European breakfast table. This is the strange cruelty of being royal. Your job is to appear both modest and flawless, both desirable and untouched. You must seem worthy without ever seeming eager. And your eligibility? It's not about you. It's about what you represent. A suitable princess isn't just well-mannered. She must be of clean blood, respectable religion, manageable temperament, and ideally carry no contagious political ideologies. A suitable prince must be wealthy, Protestant, militarily convenient, and not recently disgraced. A scandalous uncle, a failed cousin rebellion, that's enough to move him off the list. And the list, by the way, is shrinking. By now, nearly all royal families in Europe are already related, which means your options are limited to people who are, let's be honest, somewhere between cousin and third cousin with a suspiciously similar nose. But don't worry, you'll be expected to fall in love with him anyway, or at least behave as if you might. That's the most exhausting part of being eligible, pretending you're not pretending. At court functions, you'll be seated beside these suitable options. You'll be watched to see if your elbows touch, if you smile too long, if your eyes meet for 1 second too many, if he speaks German and you answer in English. Was that coyness or a cultural mismatch? You must perform discretion while being dissected by every courtier within 50 feet. This is your life now. a theater of flirtation where the stakes are national and the audience is relentless. Of course, there are rules. Rules no one says aloud, but everyone follows. Rule 1. Never get caught liking someone you weren't assigned. Rule 2. If you must flirt, make sure it's with someone your grandmother pre-approved. Rule 3. If your name appears in the gossip sheets next to someone unranked, even once, you'll spend the next month embroidering quietly in disgrace. There are naturally exceptions. A few royal couples over the decades managed to fall in love and be politically appropriate. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert are always cited as the gold standard. But what no one tells you is that even they were heavily vetted. Their romance was allowed because it made sense on paper, and because Albert was tactful enough not to embarrass anyone. Most matches don't get that luxury. Most are arranged first, and affection, if it comes, must arrive politely and on schedule, preferably sometime after the second child, but before the first diplomatic scandal. Meanwhile, your own feelings are a liability. You might begin to admire someone, a younger son with better manners, a poet prince who reads actual books, someone who says your name without mangling it. Dangerous. Very dangerous. You've been taught to suppress such thoughts, but even in the strictest courts, the human heart is a bit of a wild card. And the risk of falling for the wrong person? Catastrophic. One wrong glance, one misplaced letter, and suddenly you're no longer eligible. You're suspect. That's the thing about being a desirable royal. It's never about desire. Not your own anyway. It's about being seen to uphold the system. To be pure, poised, predictable. A blank canvas upon which an entire continent can project its aspirations and anxieties. And so you sit, smile softly, and take tea with a Belgian count you'll probably marry. You respond with grace. You pretend not to notice the old Duchess watching your every breath. And you wonder, just for a moment, if anyone has ever actually seen you. But then the music starts again. The guests rise. And someone whispers that the Austrian delegation found your profile refreshing. You've made the short list. Congratulations. The courtship has begun. Which, in your world, doesn't mean stolen glances and midnight kisses. It means choreography. You're now part of a finely tuned performance, the Royal Mating Dance, Victorian edition. And every step is scripted. It begins with a calling card, embossed, gold-edged, and delivered not to you, of course, but to your lady-in-waiting. The gentleman caller, let's call him Leopold, Duke of somewhere crucial, arrives at precisely the correct hour, escorted by 2 equerries and a sense of deep national responsibility. You greet him in the drawing room, never alone, always flanked by an aunt, a maid, or a dowager countess pretending to nap. Conversation must be charming, but restrained. Topics include music, architecture, the weather in Vienna. Topics not to include revolution, romance, or what you'd actually like in a husband. Eventually, if all goes well, meaning no one faints, offends a senior diplomat, or mentions hemophilia, you're invited for a walk. A chaperoned walk, naturally, down a manicured garden path with guards stationed just out of earshot. This is Victorian dating, timed, observed, and optimized for public digestion. And what are you wearing? Everything. That's not an exaggeration. Your dress is likely 3 layers deep: chemise, corset, crinoline, followed by silks, lace, and possibly a trained skirt heavy enough to have its own gravitational pull. Your gloves are ivory, your slippers pinched, your hair coiled in a configuration that took 3 women and a bottle of pomade to assemble. You do not run. You do not sweat. You do not adjust anything. You are draped, deliberately, expensively, and symbolically. Because courtship in your world is also pageantry, and what you wear communicates everything. The Queen understood this. Queen Victoria didn't just influence wedding fashion, she rewrote it. Before her, royal brides often wore silver, red, or blue, rich dynastic colors that shouted legacy and wealth. But Victoria chose white, not ivory, not cream, but clear, blinding white silk, satin. The choice was controversial. White, at the time, wasn't a universal symbol of purity, it was a symbol of impracticality. You wore it only if you could afford to have it destroyed. But that was the point. Victoria's wedding dress wasn't just romantic, it was strategic. A blank canvas for national symbolism, hand-stitched with Honiton lace to support British lace makers, decorated with orange blossoms, symbolizing fertility, paired with minimal jewels to emphasize modesty, and to distinguish her from the French court's decadence. It was, in effect, fashion as policy, and it worked. The press went wild, the people swooned, white became the standard. Suddenly, across Europe, royal brides were draping themselves in symbolism, every gown a national advertisement, lace from home, embroidery featuring emblems of loyalty, gowns that whispered, "I'm not just marrying him, I'm marrying into the future of your country." You learn this quickly. Your own bridal trousseau, even before there's a groom, is already being assembled. It includes slippers stitched with your family's coat of arms, gloves lined with pearls, and at least one embroidered handkerchief meant to flutter tragically during your departure procession. And then there's the tiara. Ah yes, the royal tiara. Not merely jewelry, but a crown in miniature, a glittering resume on your skull. Each diamond tells a story. This one was gifted by a Russian aunt. That one belonged to a queen who died dramatically in childbirth. The shape of the setting? A subtle reference to the House of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, or possibly an allusion to the Treaty of Ghent. Hard to say, it sparkles either way. You wear it not to dazzle, but to signal. Tiaras speak in the language of alliances. Wearing one to a banquet says, "I am loyal, available, and capable of producing heirs with this exact bone structure." And so you perform. You glide across marble floors like a ship in full sail. You tilt your head at just the right angle to reflect the candlelight. You avoid laughing too freely, but allow a hint of charm when someone references Schubert. Because every event, every dress, every glance, is a rehearsal for something bigger. Your wedding isn't just a ceremony, it's a spectacle, a political statement sewn into silk and sealed with ancestral jewels. You may not be allowed to speak your mind, but your sleeves will speak for you, and your waistline, whittled into Victorian submission, will suggest discipline, virtue, and the ability to look faint at a moment's notice, should the moment demand it. This is the costume of courtship. You are the leading lady. The set is Versailles-inspired. The props are priceless. The stakes are international. Now smile, gently. Tilt your chin, and don't trip over the metaphor. You have never met him. You've seen a painting. Possibly two, one with flattering shadows and high cheekbones, another where he's holding a falcon and pretending not to squint. You've been told he's devoted to his studies, which might mean brilliant or might mean antisocial. Hard to say. Still, the portraits have arrived, and now it's your turn. You're ushered into the conservatory, where a portrait artist waits beside a stiff velvet chair. You're posed, powdered, and told not to blink for far too long. Your governess adjusts the fall of your hair, whispering, "Tilt your chin slightly. You want to look composed, not desperate." Because this painting isn't just for admiration. It's an introduction, a visual proposal. And if the angle of your jawline doesn't suit his mother's taste, well, that's the end of that. But should the portrait pass inspection, then comes the letter, written in your most careful script, cream-colored stationery, gold-trimmed seal, a single flower pressed between the pages, not just for beauty, but for meaning, a violet for modesty, a rose for affection, a sprig of myrtle to suggest you're thinking of matrimony without actually saying the word. You keep it vague, polite, regal, because even when flirting, a princess must never appear too interested. And even if you wanted to say something real, something spontaneous, personal, even affectionate, you can't, because your letters are not private. Not really. Every word you write will be copied, catalogued, and discussed by ministers, mothers, and meddling uncles. Couriers might be intercepted, codes might be broken, and your delicate metaphor about distant stars aligning might be translated into political threat analysis by some Viennese advisor with too much time on his hands. In royal courtship, privacy is a myth. Your curiosity is a liability, and your pen must be as guarded as your posture. So you learn to write with elegance and strategic vagueness. You hint at admiration, you praise the weather, you reference a shared ancestor, third cousin on your mother's side, as if genealogy is the ultimate aphrodisiac. You do not mention dreams, fears, or anything remotely human. He replies, eventually, with something equally delicate, a compliment on your handwriting, a reference to your music preferences, perhaps a watercolor sketch of his estate, designed to show off his stables, library, and subtle military preparedness. You pretend not to notice the emphasis on lineage or land value. This is what flirting looks like at your level, ornamental, monitored, and full of plausible deniability. Still, there are moments. A pressed flower, a quote from Goethe, a gift, small, tasteful, deeply encoded, a miniature brooch featuring a crest that combines both your houses, a handkerchief embroidered with your initials, in the wrong order as a secret joke. You notice these things. You wonder if he does too. And you wonder quietly what it would be like to receive a letter not approved by a secretary. But that's not your world. In your world, every emotion must be wrapped in silk and pass through 3 layers of protocol. You're reminded often, do not give your heart where your crown cannot follow. A poetic way of saying, only love who you're allowed to marry. And even then, cautiously. The negotiations, meanwhile, are ongoing. While you write polite notes about the beauty of spring in Windsor, your parents are drafting letters about trade routes, military cooperation, and acceptable dowry ranges. Your worth is being debated in currencies you'll never touch. Will your future husband's kingdom recognize British supremacy at sea? Will your children inherit titles in both countries? Can your religious upbringing be adjusted without scandal? These are the questions being asked, while you're still wondering if he likes the sketch you sent of your spaniel. And still, the gifts keep coming. Jewelry, books, rare orchids. All chosen carefully, with the same energy one might use to defuse a bomb. Too personal, and it's a scandal. Too impersonal, and it's a snub. But just right, and it becomes court legend. Of course, not all gifts are romantic. Some are strategic decoys, designed to provoke jealousy or signal urgency. A dispatch of matching tea sets sent to 3 princesses at once. A rumor about a brooch intended for you but worn by someone else. An unsigned poem that may or may not be from your cousin. The whole thing starts to feel less like a romance and more like espionage in crinoline. But you play your part. You smile when appropriate. You thank the ambassadors. You craft thank you letters so exquisite they could be archived by future historians, which they often are. And all the while, the world watches. The newspapers speculate. The gossip sheets print your face beside his with dramatic flourishes. Your every glance becomes a headline. Your silence becomes a scandal. Because when you're royalty, even what you don't say is suspicious. You are virtue incarnate. Curiosity, if you have any, must be disguised as piety. And affection? Well, let's just say it had better be postmarked, pre-approved, and monogrammed. Because in the great game of royal matchmaking, love is a calculated risk. And you, dear listener, are the letter someone else is reading. The proposal has been accepted. You've written your thank you letters. You've nodded solemnly at your family's approval. You've probably had a quiet cry behind the tapestry. Not because you're unhappy, necessarily, but because it's all very final. Congratulations. You're engaged, and the world is now losing its collective mind. The moment your engagement becomes official, or even rumored, it sets off a tremor that shakes parliaments, church pulpits, tea parlors, and foreign ministries across Europe. Not because they care if you're in love, but because your engagement is politics in heels. The announcement begins, as always, with a carefully worded press release, or sometimes a leak, usually to a newspaper that's been bribed, threatened, or subtly nudged by a courtier with loose lips and tight deadlines. And suddenly, there it is in print. His Royal Highness, the Grand Duke of something or other, has formally proposed to Princess Yu. Cue the frenzy. Society matrons gasp. Portrait painters weep with joy. Editorials are written. Counter-editorials are written in response. In some cases, national assemblies actually debate your engagement on the record, especially if someone important feels excluded from the diplomatic loop. In the streets, there are fireworks. In the back rooms, there are headaches. Because here's the thing. Every royal marriage is an alliance, and every alliance offends someone. If you marry a German duke, France is insulted. If you pick a Catholic prince, Protestant Britain raises its powdered eyebrows. If your fiancé once attended a Russian military academy, Scandinavian royals start adjusting their travel plans. No matter what, someone feels snubbed. And that, dear listener, is the true skill of royal matchmaking, orchestrating a marriage that seems universally delightful, but is, in fact, only minimally offensive to most major powers. Behind the celebratory headlines is chaos, because once the engagement is made public, the legal war begins. Your father, or more likely a team of elite lawyers in embroidered waistcoats, begins drafting the marriage contract, a document so long, so dense, and so diplomatically fraught that reading it aloud would probably summon a 17th century ghost. It includes the dowry, your literal worth, converted into land, titles, or cash, sometimes livestock, sometimes art, sometimes coastal forts. The inheritance clause. What happens if your husband dies without an heir? What if you do? What if both of you mysteriously fall into a fjord and a cousin in Bavaria tries to seize the silver? The religious terms. What church will your children be raised in? Will you be allowed to keep your chaplain? Will kissing the wrong relic cause international scandal? The citizenship deal. Are you now technically a subject of your husband's country? Will you ever be allowed back into your own without a formal invitation? All of this is handled with exquisite formality. Silver pens, multiple languages, at least one duchess glaring at the inkwell. Meanwhile, you're busy trying to smile through a series of ceremonial appearances designed to show the world that everything is stable, harmonious, and entirely mutual. In public, you're radiant. In private, you're reviewing a clause that mentions something about permanent residence in foreign court and wondering if it's too late to fake scarlet fever. The pressure is relentless, because this isn't just a personal milestone. It's a global signal. Your engagement means your two royal houses have just forged a new connection. It might be read as a show of solidarity, or an act of aggression, or a veiled response to a recent treaty that threatened your father's naval interests. You never know. But foreign ministers are already assigning meaning to your fiancé's waistcoat color. In some cases, a royal proposal doesn't just ruffle feathers, it sparks diplomatic crisis. Take, for example, the time Queen Victoria's daughter was engaged to the Prussian crown prince. British liberals panicked about militarism. French newspapers hissed about German expansion, and Victoria, ever the strategist, had to write a dozen damage control letters before breakfast just to calm the French court. And what if, God forbid, the match is between two countries already at odds? That's when things get truly exciting. Suddenly, newspapers speculate about war, secret envoys scramble between capitals, clergymen hold emergency sermons, and the bride-to-be becomes not just a symbol, but a battleground. Because if you say yes to the wrong suitor, you might be seen as endorsing his country's ambitions, which means that smiling too sweetly could accidentally imply naval support. And if one royal backs out, it's not a breakup, it's a geopolitical rupture, sometimes even a cause for war. There have been royal proposals that were rescinded so delicately, with exchanged gifts, heartfelt notes, and mutual understanding, and yet still resulted in 2 border skirmishes and 1 embargo. But none of that will be in the official wedding pamphlet. What the people will see is this: a radiant couple waving from a balcony, flanked by flapping flags and well-rehearsed pageantry. They won't see the months of negotiations, the contract disputes, the cultural landmines. They'll see a love story, or at least a version of one. And you? You'll smile, because your engagement was not a proposal. It was a declaration of policy, sealed with a ring, timed to avoid naval tension, and choreographed to resemble affection. Now rest your hand gently atop his, not too possessive, and prepare for the spectacle of your life. The wedding is coming, and the world will be watching. You're getting married, or rather, you are being married. That is the more accurate phrasing, because once again, this is not your day. The Royal Wedding Planning Committee has assembled 23 people, minimum, only 2 of whom actually know your middle name. The rest are advisors, secretaries, bishops, wardrobe consultants, and several cousins who exist solely to argue about seating charts. You are consulted. Occasionally, but only on minor details like the color of the table linens or which of your hands you'd prefer to have kissed in the official portrait. The date? Already decided. Not by you, but by a small army of astrologers, military schedulers, and diplomatic weather predictors. It must not clash with a battle anniversary. It must not overshadow a foreign coronation. It must, ideally, take place after Parliament recess and before your fiancé's seasonal allergies begin. You are told it is a fortuitous time. You nod. It is, after all, your wedding. Next comes the guest list. Now, at first, this seems straightforward. You assume it's a matter of inviting royalty, dignitaries, perhaps a sprinkling of eligible aristocrats for visual balance. But no. No, no. This is guest list warfare. Because inviting one monarch requires inviting their rivals. And inviting their rivals means you also have to invite their estranged cousins, and then their estranged cousins' new in-laws, who were technically exiled but recently re-legitimized. Sort of. Every invitation carries a political consequence. Invite France? You'd better include Belgium. Invite Prussia? Then Denmark might boycott. Invite Queen Maria from Naples? Well, then you've insulted the anti-Bourbon faction, and possibly the British Navy. You spend 2 weeks hearing the phrase optics, my dear, repeated over and over until you start seeing it embroidered on your curtains. Eventually, the list swells to over 1,000 people, half of whom you've never met, a few of whom may or may not still be alive, and at least 3 whose names are spelled differently depending on which language you're using that week. Then, there's the seating chart, a document so sensitive it is stored in a locked cabinet guarded by 2 footmen and a deeply anxious chamberlain. Because if you accidentally seat the wrong duchess beside the wrong bishop, you might restart the Reformation. While all this unfolds, you're fitted for your dress. Correction, dresses, plural. There's the rehearsal gown, the ceremonial rehearsal gown, the actual wedding dress, the post-ceremony tea gown, the departure ensemble, and the backup dress in case you faint or the weather decides to turn biblical. The dress fittings are long, standing still for 3 hours kind of long. At least 5 people are involved at all times. 2 sewing, 1 documenting, 1 fainting from corset stress, and 1 aggressively measuring your neckline for modesty. And you're not just expected to wear the dress. You're expected to embody the nation in it. The lace must be local. The embroidery must tell a story, ideally one about peace, fertility, or the founding of your country's national bank. There will be sketches, then revisions, then whispered rumors that a rival princess in Vienna has commissioned something suspiciously similar and possibly better. A scandal. Cue dress espionage. Suddenly, you're being warned not to show your design to anyone outside your inner circle. The seamstresses are sworn to secrecy. The embroidery studio is locked at night, and one particularly nervous lady-in-waiting keeps misplacing sketches just in case someone is leaking them to the French. And the worst part? After all this effort, you must appear, on the day, effortlessly divine. Not proud, not too radiant, just radiant enough. You must walk like a saint, stand like a statue, and smile like you just won a minor war without violence. Your jewels should sparkle, but not gloat. Your veil must flutter poetically, but never tangle. You must glow with elegance, humility, and just a hint of fragile nobility, as though the sheer weight of your own perfection might cause you to swoon at any moment. This is not vanity. This is strategy, because your appearance on this day will be immortalized in paintings, in newspapers, on porcelain plates, and in the minds of millions who will never meet you, but will nonetheless decide what kind of queen or liability you'll be. And so you rehearse, not just the walk down the aisle, but how to stand still for the portrait, how to curtsy to multiple sovereigns in succession without falling, how to hold your bouquet at precisely the right angle so the embroidered swan on your sleeve is visible, but your décolletage remains inoffensive. You're taught how to look serene, how to breathe without appearing winded, how to be watched by the world and reveal nothing back. Because this isn't a wedding. It's theatrical diplomacy. And you, dear listener, are the principal actress, cloaked in tulle, diplomacy, and a crown that may or may not be fastened correctly. Now take one more deep breath. You're about to walk down the aisle of empire. The day has arrived. You wake up in a palace room filled with too many mirrors. The fire has burned out. The light is soft, filtered through heavy drapes and generations of expectation. You're not alone. Of course not. 3 maids, 2 dressers, a duchess, and 1 hovering governess are already in position, whispering in hushed tones as if God himself might be listening from the wainscoting. It's your wedding day, except it doesn't feel like yours. It feels like a national event. Because it is. Let's take a moment to step sideways in time, to the 10th of February, 1840. Queen Victoria's wedding day. She was 20 years old, small, sharp, already deeply in love with Albert, her German cousin, but also well aware that this marriage, however personal, would change the political future of the British monarchy. She chose white, not ivory, not silver, not gold, plain, brilliant white. Scandalous at the time, white was expensive, impractical, difficult to keep clean. It was, in short, a symbol of wasteful wealth. But that was the point. She didn't want diamonds. She wanted lace, specifically Honiton lace, handcrafted in Devon to boost the British lace industry. She wore orange blossoms in her hair, a modest, fragrant flower symbolizing purity and fertility. Less ostentatious than a crown, but just as political. Her veil was long, her bouquet simple, and on her chest, a brooch, a sapphire and diamond piece from Albert, given to her as a pre-wedding gift, pinned close to her heart. The ceremony took place at the Chapel Royal, St. James's Palace. But the audience? The entire empire. Back to you. Your carriage is waiting. Gold trim, glass panels, and wheels that sound surprisingly loud on cobblestone. Outside, the crowds are already screaming. Some are waving flags. Some are sobbing. Some are just here to see if anyone faints. You step in. You've practiced the wave, the smile, the gentle, demure glances to either side. You're wearing shoes you haven't walked in before, and a veil long enough to require navigation assistance from a footman. Everything about your body, every fold of your dress, every blink has been planned. The streets are lined with soldiers, musicians, journalists, and peasants pretending to understand the symbolism. You pass under banners stitched with the word unity in 3 languages. No pressure. When you reach the chapel steps, everything shifts into ceremony mode. There is a choreography to royal marriage, and you are now dancing it in front of half the world. You step out of the carriage, one hand on the groom's, not gripped, not loose, just enough to suggest affection without possession. You ascend the stairs. Inside, the air is thick with incense, sweat, and powdered wigs. You hear murmurs from foreign ministers, the rustle of silk from 12 rows of princesses, and somewhere in the rafters, a coughing reporter trying not to sneeze during the vows. You walk down the aisle slowly, like a statue learning to float. Your train follows behind, like an obedient thought. The groom waits. He smiles. You smile back. Your heart is racing, not because of love, though maybe a little, but because you know that this moment will be replayed, painted, exaggerated, and misquoted for the next 200 years. And then, the vows. Not your words. Not really. Scripted centuries ago, reviewed by clergy, practiced in private with a tutor who reminded you not to giggle when saying obey. And of course, the kiss, if there is one, will be timed, subtle, and placed precisely to avoid scandal in Vienna and applause in Prussia. Outside the chapel, cheering erupts. The people are overjoyed, not necessarily because they love you, but because they love the idea of you. A royal bride, a living fairy tale, a temporary distraction from crop failures and tax hikes, but not everyone is pleased. Scandalous commentary circulates quietly. Some call your lace too fussy. Others question the cost of the floral arches or the guest list. One newspaper critic snidely notes that your groom's cravat was not properly starched and therefore probably unfit to command naval loyalty. And then there are the hidden critiques, the whispers in salons, the murmurs in drawing rooms. She looked tired. He looked nervous. I heard the veil was French. You smile anyway, because your feelings, your real ones, are not on the schedule. You wave from the balcony. You kneel for a blessing. You let the applause wash over you like a tide that knows no mercy. Somewhere beneath the organ music and fireworks and orange blossoms, you may be happy, or relieved, or absolutely terrified. But that's not today's priority. Today, you are the symbol. Today, you are the performance. Today, you are the story. And the story, lace, brooch, and all, must be perfect. You've survived the wedding, the carriages, the cheers, the hand-kissing, veil-fixing, portrait-holding, and the final balcony wave that left your cheeks aching from too much smiling and too little food. Now the door shuts. It's quiet. No chamberlain, no cousin adjusting your sleeve. Just you, your new spouse, and a pair of servants pretending not to listen from behind the dressing screen. It's your wedding night, which, in a royal context, is not romantic. It is a matter of state, because whether or not this union has been consummated will determine everything from legitimacy to succession to the stability of entire nations. No pressure. You are expected to do your duty, lovingly, of course, gracefully, but unambiguously. There must be no question left in the minds of your political advisors, or his. And the truth is, you probably haven't been told much. For all the education, all the etiquette training, all the preparation in how to carry yourself, speak 6 languages, and calculate inheritance law in your head, no one has explained this part very well. You may have received a veiled conversation with a duchess, a vague warning about sacred unions or trusting your husband, maybe a diagram involving flowers, or, if you're Queen Victoria, perhaps a tiny blue pamphlet discreetly left in your chambers and never referenced aloud again. Even if you're in love, and not all royal couples are, it's still terrifying. There's curiosity. There's fear. There's the acute knowledge that you're being whispered about before anything has even happened. Some couples write in their diaries. Victoria, after her wedding night with Albert, described how she never spent such an evening. That's it. That's the line. Polite, brief. Probably written with the knowledge that it might one day be read by the nation. Albert, more emotionally fluent in private, called it heaven. He was 20. She was his queen. And even in love, he knew. This was not just personal. It was symbolic. Your wedding night might include gentle affection, awkward pauses, silent prayers, uncomfortable corsetry, possibly a lace garter designed by a committee and embroidered with diplomatic symbols. And if it doesn't go well, you pretend it did, Because failure to consummate a royal marriage isn't just awkward, it's political ammunition. Centuries of royal scandal have taught Europe what happens when the wedding night is a disaster. Annulments, claims of impotence, accusations of witchcraft, exiled queens, civil wars, not exaggerating. So even if your spouse faints, stammers, or suddenly remembers a military parade they were supposed to attend, there will still be a polite announcement the next morning. The marriage has been happily and fully celebrated. If necessary, a bedsheet will be discreetly paraded. Yes, that happened. It's not about truth, it's about narrative. Because in royal marriages, performance outranks privacy. And yet, beneath all the layers of protocol, performance, and whispered advice, there may still be something human. You may feel tenderness, vulnerability, a moment of real connection in the soft candlelight and silence. Perhaps even relief that the waiting, the speculation, the sheer absurd pressure of it all is finally over. But those feelings, they are yours alone. You will not discuss them at court. You will not mention them in your morning audience. You will simply walk out of your chambers, accept the congratulations of diplomats, and nod politely while someone offers you tea you didn't ask for. If there are bruises, you cover them. If there are tears, you blink them away. If it was beautiful, you keep that memory locked behind your ribs, where even the gossip sheets can't reach it. And when they ask how it went, you smile with perfect grace and say, "The night was as it should be." Because no one really wants the truth, not in public, not from royalty, and certainly not from you. You wake up early, not because you want to, but because someone knocks, gently, apologetically, and then enters anyway. The light has changed. Your chamber looks the same but feels different, as if it's already adjusting itself around your new identity, because you're not you anymore, not fully. You are now a wife, which in your case means a royal wife, which, diplomatically speaking, means someone else's property. Ceremonially, of course. Don't worry, they won't call you a possession out loud. They'll just begin referring to you in new terms. Her Royal Highness, the consort of, the Princess of, Madam, the Duchess of. It's not that they've forgotten your name. It's that your name is no longer the point. It has been replaced by your title, carefully chosen, cross-checked with international agreements, and embroidered on at least 14 tablecloths. The staff now curtsy differently, slightly lower. Your maids wait for instructions they used to give. Even your breakfast is new, not in flavor, but in tone. You're no longer served with familiarity. You are served with caution, because no one's quite sure who you are yet, including you. You sit at a small round table in a formal chamber you've never eaten in before. Across from you, your new spouse, possibly smiling, possibly stiff, possibly pretending they're not just as exhausted as you. The footmen enter. Pour tea. Withdraw. Enter again, this time with toast. Withdraw. You don't speak much. Not because there's tension, though there might be, but because you both know this is not a moment of rest. It is a transition of state. Yesterday, you were a bride. Today, you are a diplomatic extension of someone else's nation. Your letters are now signed differently. Your correspondence is screened more thoroughly. Even your bedroom has been reassigned on the official household map, as if you've migrated to another species. And whatever privacy you imagined, that ended with the ceremony. There are no adjustment periods in royal life, no post-wedding lull. You'll be expected to resume duty immediately. Depending on your role, that might include a formal appearance in your new country's capital. A thank you tour through freezing rural estates, an audience with the clergy to confirm your religious alignment, or, more delicately, a visit to the doctor to confirm that everything went as it should last night. No pressure. Even your walk is observed. Does she move like a duchess now? Is her posture more matronly? Did she gain poise overnight? You may overhear the servants discussing it. You may read about it in the newspaper. Because this isn't a honeymoon. This is an onboarding process. In some cases, you're not even allowed to keep your own wardrobe. Your dresses will be replaced, not for fashion reasons, but because your country of origin is no longer your identity. You now represent them, and they have opinions about sleeve length. If you're lucky, you get one day of relative quiet. Maybe you walk the garden. Maybe someone brings you a note from your mother telling you to stay strong. Maybe your new husband hands you a flower and says something surprisingly kind, and for a moment you feel like the world is a little softer than it seemed last night. But it won't last, because tomorrow you're scheduled to ride in a state carriage, attend a charity banquet, pose for a joint portrait with 12 foreign ambassadors, none of whom will smile. You will nod, you will listen, you will sit beside people who used to insult your father and now pretend you're their niece. And through it all, you'll feel that shift again, that strange silent truth humming behind your eyes. You belong to someone else's story now, and no one will ask if you're ready for it. You haven't even unpacked all your gowns, and already people are wondering if you've conceived. They're not subtle about it. The court physician starts visiting more often, under the guise of checking your digestion. Your mother-in-law sends you fertility charms embroidered into your handkerchiefs. The newspapers mention your complexion. That is code. Because the minute you say, "I do," the clock starts ticking. Not on your marriage, on your reproductive usefulness. You are now an air-producing machine, draped in silk, framed in portraits, expected to smile through morning sickness, and deliver a fully formed alliance within the fiscal year. Ideally, a boy. But if it's a girl, that's fine too, as long as she's the first of many. Because quantity is stability, and you are not just building a family, you are fortifying a dynasty. No pressure. Well, except for the crushing national inheritance-anchored pressure that follows you from ballroom to bedroom like a politely looming midwife. Your health is monitored, discreetly, of course, with regular reports sent to your husband, your mother, your physician, and, unofficially, at least 3 newspapers. If you look pale, possible early signs. If you look flushed, are the royal cheeks blooming? If you sneeze during Mass, God's will may be upon her. Even the servants play along. One morning, you simply ask for toast, and someone starts boiling holy water in the background, just in case. You have now entered the speculation stage of royal marriage. Every yawn is analyzed. Every canceled ride is a possible headline. And any slight change in appetite will be discussed by at least 2 foreign embassies before nightfall. And then, when you are pregnant, the real performance begins. There is no glowing in private for a royal mother to be. You must appear radiant, but not smug, serene, but not fragile, hopeful, but never show fear, because childbirth is still extremely dangerous, especially for women of your station, who are required to give birth under a chandelier, in front of witnesses, with a choir somewhere in the next room. Yes, really, The birth of a royal heir is a public affair. There are officials, physicians, footmen, and in some cases, literal political observers to confirm that the child did, in fact, emerge from the correct royal womb. Your modesty, left at the altar, and privacy, a distant dream. If all goes well and you survive, congratulations. You'll be handed a delicate, howling future head of state wrapped in lace and centuries of expectation. The nurse takes them. You nod. Someone announces it to the nation by firing cannons, ringing church bells, and updating at least 3 engraved charts. Your job? Smile. Wave gently from the window. Accept the nation's congratulations. Drink lukewarm broth and return to official duties within the month, because monarchy waits for no uterus. But let's say things don't go well. Let's say you miscarry. Or worse, you can't conceive at all. That's when the real rumors start. The speculation turns sharp. The gifts dry up. The press becomes politely cruel. You are invited to fewer balls. A foreign cousin with suspiciously good posture is suddenly spending more time at court. Your fertility, or lack of it, is now a state liability. Some blame your diet, others your upbringing, others whisper about ancestral curses or coldness of the womb. No one suggests your husband might be the issue, because of course he rides horses and smokes cigars, which are widely accepted as signs of virility. You just try not to cry during morning prayers. And what about contraception? Laughs softly in lace-trimmed horror. That conversation does not exist. Not officially, certainly not in public. You might hear of certain herbal remedies passed between chambermaids. A cousin might send you a bracelet blessed by an obscure saint with suspiciously low birth rates in her miracle record. But if you are caught avoiding pregnancy, even once, you are not just a wife. You are a traitor to the dynasty, and you don't get forgiven for that. So instead, you let the pressure build. You wear the perfumes they say help with fertility. You drink the tonics. You sleep with a pillow under your back and hope it makes a difference. You smile every time someone says, "You'll make a wonderful mother." And when the headaches come, or the cramps, or the silence where a heartbeat was supposed to be, you tell no one. You just try again. Because until there's an heir, your job is not complete. You are the womb on which empires rest, and they do not like to wait. You don't sign treaties. You don't command armies. You don't even sit in on most state meetings. But somehow, mysteriously, you still manage to move entire kingdoms. Welcome to your new job, power by proximity. You are a royal spouse now, a consort, and that means you live in the glittering margins of authority, never quite center stage, but always in the spotlight's reflection. You are expected to smile, nod, greet, birth, and above all, remain pleasantly apolitical, which is ironic, considering that your very existence is already political. The daughter of one king, the wife of another, the mother of 2 more. You are diplomatic connective tissue, wrapped in silk, perfumed with restraint. And yet, you can influence far more than anyone wants to admit. Take Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. Officially, Victoria ruled, technically, legally, gloriously. But Albert, quiet, meticulous, morally upright Albert, rewired the monarchy behind the scenes. He wrote her speeches, managed her schedules, installed a moral compass where there used to be diamonds and duels, and he did it all without ever wearing the crown. His power wasn't declared. It was implied. And yours will be too, if you're clever. Because you do have tools. They're just not swords or decrees. You have letters. You can write to relatives in other courts. A flattering word here, a soft warning there, a little compliment about someone's new archduchess. And suddenly, your husband finds himself invited to a summit he hadn't planned to attend. You have salons, informal gatherings of intellectuals, artists, and diplomats where politics are never officially discussed, but always whispered. You have portraits, posed carefully with just enough symbolism to suggest solidarity, or ambition, or mercy, depending on the viewer's agenda. And you have your bedchamber, not for seduction, necessarily, but for timing, because you know when to make a suggestion, when to raise an eyebrow, when to say, perhaps the Russian ambassador was merely nervous, not insulting. In public, you say nothing. In private, you redirect history. But it's not easy. The line between influence and interference is razor thin. If you're too vocal, you're manipulative. Too silent, you're useless. Too charming, you're dangerous. Too cold, you're broken. You learn to walk a new kind of tightrope, one embroidered with public perception and private ambition. Some days, you are a shadow with perfect posture. Other days, you are the reason two kingdoms haven't gone to war over a misinterpreted toast. And what about your spouse? Well, that depends. Some royal couples, like Victoria and Albert, genuinely grow to love one another. It isn't immediate, but with time, shared rituals, mutual respect, and the quiet intimacy of navigating duty together, something soft forms, something stable. Other marriages? Less so. There are couples who barely speak outside of official events, who live in separate wings, who carry out their duties with mechanical precision and never once exchange a private smile. Affection was never guaranteed. And because divorce is politically catastrophic, you learn to endure each other gracefully. You pose for portraits. You attend ceremonies side by side. You produce heirs and host charities and pretend, always pretend, that the rumors aren't true. You become, in essence, a role. Sometimes that role is comforting. You find a rhythm, a routine, a kind of affection that looks like friendship and feels like duty, but still warms your ribs a little when you least expect it. Other times, the role is suffocating. You are admired, but not seen. You are celebrated, but not consulted. You are praised for disappearing behind the throne. Still, you persist, because you've learned the truth of royal marriage, especially in the Victorian age. Real power rarely shouts. It smiles, it listens, it remembers every name at the table, and then writes a letter that changes the seating chart next time. It survives long enough to become indispensable, and then makes suggestions. You are not the ruler, but you are the one they come to at midnight when the speech needs softening, when the air is sick, when the French minister is refusing port and no one knows why. You are the emotional back channel, the moral barometer, the diplomatic butterfly whose wings trigger avalanches in distant courts. And when you are gone, decades from now, long after the crown has passed to another, it will be your influence that historians will trace in the margins of letters and the phrasing of new alliances. Because the world will remember your spouse, but the world will run on what you made possible. The bells toll before you can catch your breath. The corridors are hushed. The servants speak in whispers. The drapes are drawn. The clocks are stopped. And somewhere outside, a black banner flutters like a warning. Your husband, the king, the prince, the crown bearer, is gone. You are now a widow. But not just any widow, a royal widow, which means you don't get privacy, or quiet, or time. You get protocol. First comes the announcement, drafted with careful solemnity, signed by someone who wasn't in the room when he died, and delivered to the world as if the entire continent has just lost a grandfather. Next comes the transformation. You change clothes, not just once, but in stages. First, you wear what's called deep mourning. Heavy black crepe, jet beads, gloves dyed with iron salts. Your undergarments are black. Your handkerchiefs are black. Even your parasol casts a shadow that looks like grief incarnate. No jewels, no laughter, no color, not even gray. You are expected to walk like a memory, beautiful, composed, and faintly tragic. And the public? They're watching. They want to see your heartbreak, but tastefully. They want sorrow that's inspiring, grief that enhances your dignity, tears that never smudge your powder. Your mourning becomes your most important public performance, and the rules are endless. You may not dance for 2 years. You may not remarry within 3. You may not wear colored clothing for at least 24 months, and even then, only in whispers, dusty lavenders, faded mauves, the occasional navy blue if your tailor is brave. Jewelry? Allowed, but only if it's black, jet, onyx, vulcanite, or morning hair jewelry. Yes, hair. Your husband's hair, specifically. Pressed into brooches, braided into lockets, or woven into floral patterns you pin near your heart. Every part of you must say, I remember. And if you don't, if you appear too cheerful at a garden party, or smile too soon in a portrait, or wear a suspiciously lively shade of lilac at a christening, prepare for scandal. Because as a royal widow, your sorrow isn't about healing, it's about honor. And, of course, optics. Which brings us to Queen Victoria. No one mourned quite like her. When Prince Albert died in 1861, Victoria plunged into mourning so profound and so enduring that it practically became her brand. She wore black for the rest of her life. She avoided public appearances. She canceled balls, withdrew from society, and made grief her national uniform. She even ordered that Albert's clothes be laid out for him every morning for 40 years. Was it genuine? Probably. She adored him. He was her advisor, her partner, her anchor. His death devastated her. But was it also strategic? Absolutely. Her prolonged mourning became a kind of power. In a world where widows were often expected to fade quietly, Victoria made her sorrow central to her reign. She transformed personal loss into public symbolism, a grieving widow standing tall as the mother of an empire. And the people? They found it moving, tragic, noble. They called her the Widow of Windsor. Her image softened, her popularity recovered. Her monarchy, once shaky, became unshakable. Because even grief in royal hands can be political currency. But not everyone has Victoria's luxury. For most royal widows, mourning is not just emotional, it's administrative. You must adjust your household, your staff, your daily schedule. If your husband held power, that power now shifts, and so might your living quarters, your finances, even your official residence. You might move out of the palace you called home for decades, only to be relocated to a smaller, quieter estate, known euphemistically as the dower house. Translation: lovely gardens, fewer maids, no influence. And what about remarriage? That depends on your age, your uterus, and the political climate. If you're still of childbearing age, and the dynastic math makes sense, you might be paired up again. Not for love, of course, for stability. You'll receive a new title, a new crest, a new wardrobe of black to blue to gold over the course of 3 years. But if there's no strategic gain to remarrying, you don't. Romantic love? Rarely a factor. Desire? Even less. Your heart belongs to history now. And even if you find affection in some quiet corner of the palace, with a tutor, a guard, a sympathetic widow from another court, it stays hidden, carefully, always. Because the role of the royal widow is not to find joy again. It is to symbolize loss that transcends personal pain. You are grief with posture. You are silence with a schedule. And whether you weep in private or stare blankly into the fire for hours, or take long, slow walks through empty gardens where he once stood, you will do it dressed to impress. Because your sorrow is no longer yours alone. It belongs to the people, to the newspapers, to the portraitists who will capture you draped in velvet and veils, eyes slightly misted, expression noble and uncomplaining. That is the expectation. That is your new uniform. You are the queen of absence now, and no one gets to stop looking. By now you've mastered the rules. You've married the prince or the princess. You've worn the veil, played your part, borne the heirs. You've smiled through ceremony and survived childbirth in a tiara. Maybe even mourned with proper posture. Congratulations. You've completed your royal marriage. Now what? Well, if you're Queen Victoria, you start matchmaking at scale. You become a human marriage bureau, sending sons and daughters across Europe like decorative ambassadors, pairing them with archdukes, kaisers, czars, and assorted nobility until the family tree looks less like a lineage and more like a spiderweb soaked in tea. And it worked. At first. Victoria gave birth to 9 children. They, in turn, gave her 42 grandchildren. 7 of those grandchildren eventually sat on European thrones, including Germany, Norway, Russia, Romania, Greece, Spain, and the United Kingdom. That's not just impressive. That's dynastic imperialism with a baby bonnet. She earned the nickname Grandmother of Europe. Not metaphorically, literally. Chances are, if a monarch was making headlines in the early 1900s, they were somehow related to Queen Victoria, by blood, by marriage, or by very awkward dinner seating arrangements. And the reasoning? Simple. Royal marriage. Diplomacy. Forget treaties. Forget military alliances. If you wanted peace in Europe, you married your daughter to the Tsar's nephew and hoped no one held grudges over dessert. Every engagement was a handshake between empires. Every wedding, a carefully staged signal of political alignment. But here's the thing about interlocking dynasties. They make wars much more personal. When tensions rose, and they always did, these weren't just national conflicts. They were family fights. Take World War I. At its root, it was a crisis of politics, nationalism, alliances. But it was also, absurdly, a cousin's quarrel. Picture this. On one side, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, grandson of Queen Victoria. On another, King George V of Britain, also Victoria's grandson. And on yet another, Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, Victoria's grandson-in-law. That's right, 3 world leaders, all cousins, all at war, all raised on the same family etiquette, likely taught to sit the same way at royal dinners, and all suddenly deciding that the best way to resolve international tension was through trench warfare. So much for diplomacy by DNA. Because as it turns out, having the same grandmother doesn't prevent bloodshed. It just complicates the dinner conversation. Victoria, by that time, had been gone for over a decade. But her shadow lingered, in coronation ceremonies, in state portraits, and most of all, in the unstable foundation she left behind. A Europe glued together by lace and loyalty, but cracking under its own contradictions. You see, royal weddings might have looked glamorous, the gowns, the tiaras, the cathedral acoustics. But beneath the tulle was a silent question. Did they work? Did the marriages succeed? Not politically, but personally? Well, let's just say, not all of Victoria's descendants shared her luck in love. Some, like her daughter Vicky and Frederick III of Germany, had genuine affection, but were caught in political tides they couldn't escape. Others lived in palaces with separate wings, or maintained polite silence over breakfast for decades, or sent letters that sounded more like diplomatic reports than love notes. One granddaughter married into the Russian imperial family and was executed by revolutionaries in a basement. Another was dethroned during a coup. A few became beloved queens, others footnotes in tragic family trees. Because monarchy doesn't guarantee happiness. It just memorializes the illusion of it. And the wedding portraits? Oh, they're stunning. Rows of perfectly coiffed cousins, arranged by hierarchy, holding bouquets with military precision. But look closely. Behind the diamonds and the posture, behind the swans and the velvet carpets, is the exhaustion of generations bred for appearances, not intimacy. It's a family album with no real page for sorrow, because sorrow wasn't photogenic. Legacy was. And Queen Victoria? She left one, not just in grandchildren or ceremonial black, but in a monarchy model that mistook connection for closeness, that believed if you just married enough people to each other, peace would follow. Spoiler, it didn't. Instead, the 20th century became a graveyard of empires, many of them run by people who had once exchanged wedding favors. By the end of the First World War, most of Victoria's descendants had lost their thrones, their countries, or their lives, and all that remained? Portraits, letters, lace, and the legacy of a woman who, for all her sentimental diaries and dog-loving gentleness, unintentionally helped design a world that would soon collapse under the weight of its own perfectly arranged bloodlines. So, did Victorian royal marriage succeed? In building connections? Yes. In preventing wars? Not quite. In producing heirs? Absolutely. Too many, perhaps. And in producing happiness? Only in the paintings, the kind where no one blinks, no one speaks, and everyone looks exactly where they're told to look. Well, that was quite a journey. You were born into a palace with zero decision-making power. You were groomed to marry someone you'd never choose, for reasons you'll never fully understand. You endured fitting rooms, gossip columns, awkward letters from foreign courts, and a wedding rehearsal that felt more like troop deployment. You were praised for your posture, judged for your waistline, married for your bloodline, and inspected daily, like a piece of national furniture. Your wedding wasn't romantic. It was a press release with tiaras. Your honeymoon wasn't relaxing. It was a transfer of power wrapped in lace. And your married life? Well, it might have included love, but it absolutely included diplomacy, airs, awkward silences, and very public grief. Because in the Victorian royal world, marriage was duty before it was desire, performance before partnership, strategy before storybook. And while modern romance might chase butterflies and sunsets, yours was built on border negotiations and ceremonial seating charts. Still, you made it. You've played your part in the dynastic theater. You've fulfilled your role, kept your veil perfectly arranged, and upheld a system that believed stability could be worn like a crown. Now, you can rest. Let the bells fade. Let the carriages roll on without you. Let the portraits gather dust. Because your chapter is over. You've done your duty. And somewhere, another royal child is waking up in stiff pajamas, being measured for a future they didn't choose. Sleep now, Your Highness. You've earned it. Let the next pawn take their turn.